Welcome to the Pod-Key summary of what's new in the Foundation Models framework from WWDC 2026. Apple's making a pretty big move here. The whole Foundation Models framework is going open source, and at the same time it's widening the ways developers can use local models, cloud models, vision, search, and evaluation tools without stitching together a bunch of separate systems. The through line is flexibility with guardrails. You can run models on device, hand tougher jobs to private cloud compute, plug in third-party models, and even test whether your prompt changes actually made anything better before you ship. The headline is that the full Foundation Models framework, including the core SDK, is being released as open source. That means developers aren't just consuming a sealed box anymore. They can inspect the code, modify it, and contribute back, which usually makes a framework more trustworthy and a lot easier to learn from. Alongside that, there's a separate utilities package that can update between major OS releases. That part matters because the LLM world moves fast, and Apple clearly doesn't want every experimental idea stuck waiting for the next big platform cycle. So things like profile modifiers, a skill API, transcript management helpers, and even a chat completions compatible model can live there and evolve faster. A big architectural change is the new language model protocol. In plain English, it gives developers one common interface for both local and remote models. So a language model session doesn't have to care nearly as much about what's behind the curtain. Apple is open sourcing two implementations right away: Core A language model and MLX language model, which can run on the Apple Neural Engine or the GPU. And third parties can meet that same protocol too. Anthropic and Google are publishing Swift packages that plug into this setup. So developers can bring in their latest large models through Swift Package Manager without reinventing the plumbing. That doesn't make external services free or frictionless. Of course, you still have to handle auth, whether that's OAuth or keychain storage, and you still have per-token billing to watch. The nice part is the framework surfaces usage through the session's usage property. So there's at least a built-in way to keep an eye on the meter before somebody discovers their chatbot has expensive taste. Apple also rebuilt the on-device language model, so it now supports vision. Apps can attach images directly to prompts, including things like UI image, NS image, and CG image, and get answers that take the visual input into account. That opens the door to a lot of very practical experiences. But there's a trade-off. Developers have to manage. Image tokens eat into the model's context window. So bigger images mean more token usage and more latency. In other words, higher resolution is not automatically better. Sometimes the smart move is just giving the model enough picture to do the job without making it stare at a giant file for no reason. For heavier work, private cloud compute is the step up. It brings a 32,000 token context window, a reasoning mode that makes the model spend longer thinking through an answer, and it uses the same engine behind Apple Intelligence features. What Apple is really emphasizing here is that PCC is fully managed. There are no API keys, no account setup, no authentication dance, and Apple says prompts are never stored. That's a pretty meaningful privacy promise, especially for developers who want cloud-scale capability without turning their app into a mini compliance project. The framework is also getting built-in tools that make multimodal apps much more practical. There's a barcode reader tool and an OCR tool, both powered by Vision, so an LLM can pull structured information out of images without developers having to train custom models. That means things like inventory scanning or document digitization can happen right inside a language model session instead of being bolted on from 3 different directions. And one of the most requested features, retrieval augmented generation, is now covered too through a search tool that uses the local spotlight index. So the model can pull in current personal or domain-specific knowledge without sending that search off device, which is a very Apple-ish version of RAG. If developers want to see it working, Apple's pointing them to the sample called LLM Search using Core Spotlight. Another useful addition is the Dynamic Profiles API. This lets an app switch instructions, tools, and even model configurations inside a single language model session, depending on app state, while keeping the conversation history intact. So you could start with a lightweight system language model for analysis, then move the same session over to private cloud compute with deeper reasoning when the user wants brainstorming or something more involved. That kind of handoff is exactly the sort of thing people want from modern AI features, because users don't care which model answered, they care that the app stayed coherent. And once you've built all that, Apple's also giving developers an evaluations framework. It's a Swift library for running statistical tests on prompts and measuring things like accuracy. So prompt changes can be judged with actual data instead of vibes and selective memory. That's not the flashiest feature in the batch, but for production apps, it may be one of the most important. Apple's also extending this beyond app UI work. There's a new FM command line tool that exposes both the on-device model and private cloud compute from the terminal. It supports chat, file name generation, and script integration, so developers can pipe output into shell workflows for summarization, extraction, or content generation. That's the kind of feature that quietly becomes part of somebody's daily routine once they realize it can save 10 annoying little steps. And for people working in notebooks and research environments, there's now a Python SDK with parity to the core Swift functionality. It gives data scientists access to the same on-device model, including availability checks and prompt-to-structured response flows in just a few lines, which should make prototyping a lot smoother across teams that don't all live in Swift. Taken together, this feels less like a single feature drop and more like Apple trying to turn foundation models into a real developer platform. Open source core, faster moving utilities, local and cloud model options, built-in vision and search, and actual evaluation tools is a pretty complete story. And honestly, any week where OCR, Spotlight, Python, and shell scripts all show up in the same AI conversation is at least a little interesting. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.